So without further ado, I'd like to bring on Devin to talk about Multichain Uniswap. And given all the things that are happening in this L2 ecosystem, this is the perfect opportunity for you to think about and learn about how you can potentially also structure your projects to be on multiple chains. So Devin, welcome. And hi.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me today.
I'm doing great. It's been a really fun day. I've learned so much in
Yeah,
good shape
very,
for me.
very busy, it seems. I caught the end of Jesse's talk. And yeah, the base launch has been super exciting and on-chain summer is very cool. So very exciting time to be building in the space.
Absolutely. Well, I'll let you take on with the rest of the presentation, and I'll get out of your way.
Great. Thanks so much, Kartik. And thank you all for being here with me today. Today, I'm here to talk about multi-chain Uniswap, Uniswap protocol, and cross-chain generally. And I'm here to fill you in on a few different things. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Devin Walsh, and I'm the executive director and one of the co-founders of the Uniswap Foundation. I'll kick off by just explaining a little bit about what that means. What is the Uniswap Foundation? How is it different than companies like Uniswap Labs? Then I will go into some background info on Uniswap cross-chain, some 101 on how Uniswap goes and is deployed on other chains, whether they're L2s or other L1s, some history there as well. And then what I thought would be helpful for this audience of hackers is talking through the opportunity for multi-chain Uniswap and multi-chain generally for protocols, as well as some of the biggest considerations that I have and I think the Uniswap DAO has when we deploy protocols on other chains. While the opportunity for multi-chain protocols is large, we are still early, and there are some frictions and things that I think could be made easier to do when we think about deploying protocols cross-chain. So first off, what is the Uniswap Foundation? So I, along with my co-founder, Ken Ng, founded the Uniswap Foundation 1 year ago, approximately in last summer. Right now, we are a team of 7 operating remotely around the world. It's possible some of you who are ETH Global Hackathon frequenters may have met myself or some of my colleagues at some of the hackathons around the world. And we are a nonprofit that's focused on supporting the growth, decentralization, and sustainability of the Uniswap protocol and ecosystem. We do that using $60 million in funding that we've received from the Uniswap DAO that goes towards grants to build developer tooling, content, interfaces, cool apps on top of Uniswap, alongside new committees, processes, groups, events that support the longevity and sustainability of the protocol and ecosystem. And if you want to learn more, you can visit us online or on our Twitter. I would recommend following us on Twitter because next week we will be posting our first set of requests for proposals. In other words, grants funding opportunities to build for Uniswap v4, which should be coming to be deployed by end of this year, potentially early next year. So Uniswap X chains, Uniswap across chains. Uniswap protocol, as many of you know, was originally deployed on Ethereum, but since then has been deployed on many other chains, both L2s and L1s. A quick primer on how that happens. The key inputs to a deployment happening on other chains from the protocol's perspective are the open source license on the protocol, called it the BSL or business source license, as well as the Uniswap DAO. So Uniswap v3 and Uniswap v4 upcoming are controlled by a business source license, which essentially prevents others from deploying the protocol for 2 years unless they've been granted an exemption. In this case, the DAO is able to grant exemptions to teams. And after 2 years, the protocol transitions to a GPL license. So in that 2-year period, when the BSL is live, the DAO can vote. And as you can see on the right hand of my screen, you have some recent votes that the DAO has conducted to in this case recognize, but pre-GPL to deploy the protocol on other chains. And once the code transitions to GPL, anyone can deploy anywhere, and the DAO recognizes canonical deployments, which are supported by the DAO and Foundation. And I can go into why that canonical recognition is important a bit later on. Some history. So as many of you know, Uniswap has been around for a few years now. The most recent live version, Uniswap v3, was deployed May 2021, so a bit more than 2 years ago. And swiftly after that was quickly deployed on Optimism, Arbitrum, and Polygon, some of the earliest L2s in the space. The first L1 deployment on Zello was conducted a little bit, maybe a year and a half ago or so. And over the past two years, 11 deployments have been recognized as canonical deployments of Uniswap v3 on other chains. And the DAO recognizes those deployments by through essentially an ENS subdomain, v3deployments.uniswap.eth. You could check those out and basically look at the address, which has been recognized as canonical by the DAO on all of these chains. Most recently, I know you all just heard from Jesse Pollock. Uniswap was deployed on Base, and it was also deployed on Linea. Those are two of the most recent deployments which have been done. Now, cross-chain usage. So I think it's notable to call out how popular some of these X Uniswap deployments are. So 5 of the top 15 DEXs in terms of volume are Uniswap deployments. You can see that Uniswap on Arbitrum is the third most popular in terms of volume DEX as of today. Also notable are the fees generated on Uniswap. You can see that in terms of average daily fees, Uniswap is only behind Ethereum, and notably ahead of Bitcoin and BNB chain in terms of fees generated. And you can see that those fees are not only coming from the Ethereum deployment, but also Arbitrum, Polygon, Optimism, etc. So when you think about Uniswap deployment cross chains, it's not only in name and like philosophically believing in the power of multi-chain, but also in terms of true people are showing with their action how needed and valued these cross-chain deployments are. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today as well, that I'm sure you're hearing quite a bit of, are the opportunities in terms of cross-chain deployments. So as we could see from the last slide, there is product market fit for cross-chain deployments of Uniswap for sure. Our vision, or I believe the future of the space, is multi-chain, and that on all of these chains you will have tokens that require swapping and that requires liquidity, and we envision Uniswap to be the liquidity layer for those tokens across all chains. And as again, many of you know, many chains have different trade-offs. So speed, for one, transaction cost, and I want to call this out because for Uniswap, you not only have the cost to swap, but also to be a liquidity provider. So to provide assets which can be swapped against. And that is an activity which for many on the Ethereum chain is untenable if you don't have too much capital to provide liquidity with. I was doing a test last week where I was providing liquidity on Ethereum Mainnet with probably about $100 worth of capital to just test out a new function, and went to rebalance, and it was $50 worth of gas in order to merely rebalance my liquidity. And that is just unsustainable on the Ethereum mainnet, but that's an activity which is much cheaper and can thus be done much more efficiently and effectively on L2s like Optimism and Arbitrum and Base. And then something else I want to call out is the fact that different chains and different L2s will also have different focus areas and different distribution to serve different use cases and different populations. So Celo, the first L1 that Uniswap was deployed to, has focused on the use case of tokenized carbon credits and has broad distribution across the developing world. Coinbase's base similarly will have, strong distribution into, a slightly less crypto native population than some folks who are on chain all the time. But there are still many frictions that exist today with cross-chain deployments. Having gone through quite a few of these myself, I think there are definitely areas that I can speak to from experience that have troubled us in the past, and I think trouble also other teams which deploy their protocols cross-chain. And I'll dig a bit into each of these, but three that I'll call out are bridges and bridge security. Two is the integrity of a deployment, and three are support for the deployment. It's one thing to actually deploy code. For that code to become useful on the chain is a whole other story, and has a number of dependencies. For one, bridge security. So why does Uniswap care about bridges? Why does the Uniswap protocol care about bridges? Well, Uniswap governance, so decisions to turn on protocol fees, to create fee tiers, and to do other things with the protocol are occur on Ethereum. If a decision is made via Uniswap governance to turn on fees on another chain like Optimism, or to add a fee tier like the 1 BIP fee tier on Optimism or Polygon, that decision is made on Ethereum, but that message needs to be passed in a secure way to the factory contract on Optimism or Polygon. And we, as the DAO, need to trust that that message will not be compromised, and that the bridge, which owns the factory contract on the other chain, will not be compromised. As many of you have likely seen, bridges are a developing area of the crypto ecosystem, and there have been a number of hacks and attacks over the past several years. When it comes to Uniswap, a bridge attack could compromise ownership of the cross-chain deployment, and a malicious hacker could potentially take over that deployment and decide to turn on fees and send them all to his or her self, which is not a scenario that the Uniswap DAO would want to see happen, which is why we care about bridge security. Unfortunately, bridge security is notoriously difficult to assess, and it is nearly impossible for the typical delegate, even the technically savvy delegate, to do well, given the amount of context and time required to do it. We've seen in the past, some of you may have seen earlier this year, there was a situation that kind of came up in Uniswap DAO, in which there were potential conflicts of interest between delegates who had also invested in bridge teams, which caused some debate within the community about how these decisions should be made. And so what we did at the foundation was funded the creation of a committee of independent experts on bridges to define the Uniswap protocol use case, build a comprehensive framework for assessing the security of bridges for that Uniswap use case. And then they diligenced, I think, 8 or 9 bridges in total, and recommended 2 bridges for use, as well as a roadmap for the other bridges to be considered usable and secure for the Uniswap use case. The team also supported and is continuing to support, and we're continuing to fund development of a multi-bridge aggregation solution. So you can think of this as a kind of multi-sig of bridges that adds, so 2 of 3, 3 of 5 bridges from Ethereum to some other chain that need to approve a message before it's sent, just adding that even more security to the mix. Another consideration, number 2, the integrity of the deployment. So earlier in the slide I mentioned the licensing of Uniswap v3. So today, Uniswap v3 is GPL, totally open source. Anyone can fork it. Anyone can deploy Uniswap v3 anywhere today, which is great. It's great that anyone can build and play around with this code and use it as they would like. However, so there are some kind of considerations and things that we at the foundation and the DAO thought were important to address here. Given how broadly and widespread usage of the Uniswap protocol is, we thought it important for LPs and users generally to know which deployments have been reviewed and approved by and are owned by the Uniswap DAO itself. And there are a few examples of why this is important. And I think the tweet that I actually sent out yesterday is a good illustration of this. So the governance lead on my team, Aaron, basically found that there was there are two deployments of Uniswap v3 on Base. One that was voted on by the Uniswap DAO to be canonical and recognized, and another that was not, which again is totally great. Like, Base is permissionless. Anyone can deploy the Uniswap v3 code. The reason we thought it was important to call that out is that this deployer had turned on fees and was sending fees to themselves, which again, totally fine to do. But if you're a liquidity provider and you're providing liquidity to that deployment, you might not realize that you're actually giving up a portion of your fees to this deployer, because you may think that you're providing liquidity to the canonical Uniswap v3 protocol, which does not have turned on fees, and you just may not realize the fact that there are multiple deployments, some of which have different parameters that impact your return in this case. This was not the case here, but it's also possible for a deployment to have code rearranged, deleted, or maliciously updated to rug users. And of course, that's something we really care about, or we care about preventing. We would not want folks to, go to swap or provide liquidity on a deployment of Uniswap on Base or any other L2 or other chain and be harmed by that usage. So that all gets to why we as a DAO, the Uniswap DAO, has decided to take this step of recognizing the canonical deployments, the deployments where users can trust, the code has been deployed by trusted sources. It's been reviewed by folks in the DAO. It has the same parameters as that you would expect a deployment of Uniswap to have. And I call this out because as we saw yesterday, me tweeting about this is probably not the right long-term solution to this problem or to this, I guess, like, consideration that we have. So that's another point I'll call out. And the third is chain, middleware, and interface support. So I call this out here for if you've approved and are excited to deploy cross-chain, that's only the beginning of your journey in some cases. Even if another chain is EVM compatible, some EVM chains may not have the same EIP support as Mainnet, which for Uniswap will be relevant for V4. Uniswap V4 is dependent upon an EIP 1153, which will be introduced in the Cancun hard fork. And if an EVM compatible chain does not have that EIP, V4 will work differently on those chains and will not have the gas efficiencies that EIP 1153 chains have. Middleware may not be available across all chains where you deploy Uniswap. So, or the middleware may function differently. And in a one example I'll call out here is for folks who have used the Graph. The Graph is an amazing tool that we use with Uniswap in order to index and make queryable Uniswap data. We found that on Arbitrum, the Arbitrum chain was too fast for the subgraph. So we had to, one, for a year or two, to be honest, some data was actually broken on the info.uniswap.org website until the foundation provided a grant to a developer to do some custom optimizations to the Arbitrum subgraph to speed it up so it could keep up with the chain and provide data to our users. And third, interface support requires additional dev work. So in the Uniswap realm, you may be very familiar with the Uniswap app front end, which is maintained by Uniswap Labs. And in some cases, in this case, not all chains which Uniswap protocol is deployed on are actually readily available on this interface yet. Popular interfaces may not have the development resources required to maintain all of the chain support, given some of the considerations I've mentioned before. So all of that being said, this leads to some frictions per additional deployment of a protocol. So with that, I think I'm just at about 25 minutes time. Wanted to say thank you again for having me. And I am happy to chat this weekend or, over the next week, however long folks are hacking. Reach out to me on Twitter. I'm at Devin A. Walsh. And you should also follow us on Twitter to see some of the grants that we'll be excited to support next week.
That was actually very informative. This is I learned a bunch of things around how you structure the grants and the foundation here. But you brought up a really, really interesting point, which is we will see some malicious behavior here, especially when the code is public, and being able to actually streamline that and at least streamline the communication, if not like the resolution, preventing these scam potential situations is a very key requirement that not only just for Uniswap, but every single protocol that's thinking about going on different chains. So having some better frameworks is something that I feel like you and the rest of your team and a few others will pioneer very soon, and others can always steal from for the better. But I'm really happy to see this is already happening, and we don't have to worry about we have to wait for something to go wrong before we start thinking about these things actively, which is it's just a really good pattern to follow here.
Yeah. I think threading the needle between, embodying and embracing open source ideals while also, doing what it takes to ensure user protection is definitely a tough line to cross. It's something that, I don't really think there's a great playbook for today, but we're certainly trying to figure it out. And I'm also excited. That's why I'm so happy that you guys have these hackathons, because there are very smart people here who can help us figure these things out.
Yes, I think the people usually think about hackathons as a way to come up with ideas in products, but I exclusively think of them as a way for us to figure out what's broken, and that helps with more net new progress than the first one.
Yeah, there's quite a list. I think I heard the end of his talk where he was saying they in the past 3 days that they've aggregated quite a list of things. And I second that. Many things, a lot. I think for some of us who have been in the space for a long time, I think there are a lot of things that have been broken for so long we don't even realize they're broken.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
the power of defaults for us in our brains versus people oh, this is annoying, and I wonder why, and oh, this is how it is. But you actually get to see that when you bring in way more people who are reacting for the first time. So it's been a great pattern, and hopefully we'll see some better guidance on how to think about multi-chain deployments from that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, good luck hacking to everyone here, and yeah, again, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, and hopefully, if you think you have a solution to some of those issues I brought up, please reach out. We have grant funding to support you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Devin.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.